I feel sorry for people who have to edit me, which is why book writing is by far the most enjoyable. Chuck Klosterman.
You're listening to Writing Roots, brought to you by Aspen House Publishing.
Welcome to Writing Roots. I'm Lee Hull.
And I'm Lee Esses. And if you haven't listened to the episode prior to this one, we definitely suggest that you listen to that one first, because this is the counter argument. Some people want to edit something to death, or if you're like me in today's episode, the struggle is really finding motivation to edit anything at all.
This is for all of you people who like to write a manuscript and then do nothing with it, or write a manuscript and just publish it because you don't feel like editing. Both of which are problems. I mean, if you're just writing because you want to write and you don't actually want to publish anything, that's a totally different topic. But this is to go along with our theme for the month of polishing your draft, of getting it ready to have that final draft to publish.
So if you are like me and you fall into this category, you might be someone who doesn't like to be reminded of their own failings. I am one of those people who, when you edit me, I have to self-discipline and pretend to be mature during the process.
It's not always a problem with not liking to address the imperfections, but sometimes it's just that you enjoy the first draft. You enjoy the writing to start with. That is the fun part for us. Editing is kind of a slog.
These types of people also tend to be the free spirits. I don't care what other people think. I'm just going to do things my way. And hand in hand with that, they don't really want to pay that much attention to the rules.
They don't care about genre expected word counts. They don't care about whether or not explosions can be heard in space. They don't care about whether there may be some plot inconsistencies here or there, because they just had fun writing the story and you should have fun reading it.
And they also finish their first draft and going, this is good enough. So during the writing of the first draft, they make as much effort as possible to make sure that that first draft is great so that the rest of the editing process is less painful.
When you are looking into polishing your draft and into finding that motivation to edit, you really need to ask yourself a couple of questions. Really, one question. Do you want to publish, and do you want to monetize your art? If the answer is yes, this episode is for you. If the answer is no and you don't plan on publishing, that's perfectly okay. Take joy in that first draft and don't worry about the rest of it.
You are by no means a lesser author because you're choosing not to publish. That just means you're writing selfishly, which is the goal.
So how do you find that motivation? A lot of that is going to be in how you address your first draft, and you need to change your mindset. It is no longer a first draft. It is time to view it a little bit more analytically and less emotionally.
A lot of what changed in me when I found the motivation to edit actually came in how I wrote my first draft. That need for perfectionism in the first draft makes it so the editing process is much more painful. If I walk into the first draft knowing that I have the editing as a safety net, then when it comes time to edit, it's much easier to actually edit because I already have a launching point. I started the draft trusting that the editing process will catch me if I fall.
And that really, I think, helps to, when you finish that first draft, have the motivation to fix it, because you know, looking back on it, that there are things that you left to be able to fix. You left in some bad cliches because you couldn't think of a better way to phrase it. You left in numbers instead of character names, Lee.
Guilty. And this also goes for those moments of writer's block when you're intimidated by the scene you know you have to write, because then you can go in brackets, or I like to put a ZZZ, in front of the synopsis of the scene that I'm now skipping so I can get onto the fun part and then come back to it. So after you know how it ends, especially you pantsers, coming back to it, it's much easier to fill in those gaps because then you're not intimidated by the whole story. You know what happens down the road, so this little scene is much easier.
Another thing that can help you find the motivation to edit is to treat it differently than writing. One of the things to help with that is to change your environment, change the music you listen to for writing versus editing.
For me, because music is very much an emotional thing, I will use especially movie soundtracks, video game soundtracks, these kinds of things to help me write my first draft. But when it comes to editing, I need perfect silence. Because I'm focused, I'm working on the nitty-gritty details in order to make something better. So as I have the computer in front of me, it makes a difference what I'm hearing and what mode that I am in during the editing or writing process.
This can also go for what environment you place yourself in. Some people need to write in perfect silence, so they set themselves up in a corner of their house where they can kind of lock themselves away from the world, but they'll go to a coffee shop to edit, or vice versa. Placing yourself somewhere new, somewhere different than where you write, will help you get into a mentality that this is different from writing. You are not creating your first draft. You're not redoing anything. You are now editing. And being in a different environment can kind of trick your brain into believing that.
And hand in hand with that, change up how you're reading it. Do a voice dictation. Change your font. Make it so it's double-spaced instead of single-spaced. Print it out versus having it on the screen. Change up how you're consuming the story. All of these things will help you get out of writing mode and into editing mode. Another way to make sure you stay motivated is to monitor your time. This means scheduling a time. Nobody talk to me on Saturdays until I have this edited. Because when you're monitoring your time, then you have a reason to do it. And it's much more difficult to find excuses to do something else instead of editing.
In that same sense of scheduling time to do it, make sure you're moderating your breaks when you schedule out that time. Because if you are stepping away and taking too many breaks, just like with the writing process, you're not allowing your mind to get into the right mental state. So make sure that you do spend enough time, even if you don't feel like you're making progress. Try to spend longer focusing on it and working on those edits rather than stepping away because you got bored. I think that's, for me, one of my biggest struggles is my attention span is really short when my phone is right next to me and I can be cruising dumb TikTok videos instead.
Yeah, move your phone into a different room and put some sort of physical barrier. Put your shoes in front of the door so that it's harder to open that door and go get your phone. Make sure you have all your water and stuff nearby so that you can minimize those breaks that you need to get up in order to use the restroom and that kind of thing. Have all of your tools and approach your editing session with focus. That way you'll get the most out of it and you'll be done with it sooner.
And I know we've mentioned this before with the editing, but if you have a checklist of things that you're looking for in that particular editing round, it can help you focus a little bit better. Maybe in that editing round, you're looking for sentence structure that needs to be improved. Maybe you are looking for plot problems and plot holes or whatever. And then on top of kind of having that checklist of what you're looking for, make sure you're rewarding yourself. Make sure that you have a reason to make editing a pleasant experience.
Chocolate is great for that. So every time I finish a pass where I've read through it and it took me 3 days to make sure that all of my metaphors are consistent. And I can check that off the list, and that in and of itself is really nice. And then I can go and have sushi because I earned it because I finished that pass. Just having a list can be enough for especially task-oriented people because there's a satisfaction in checking something off the list. For me, the rewards have to be caloric or they don't count.
A lot of why we talk to you about finding the motivation and about making sure you're editing is that the editing process does so much to help you improve your writing. When you can look at it, when you can study it and figure out what's working, what isn't working, and how to improve it, the next time you sit down to write a story, it's going to be that much easier because you have a better understanding of your own writing and of your own skill.
That doesn't mean to edit yourself as you write. That is the opposite of what we're saying here. But you will innately learn these skills that will make you a better author. So when you're writing, it is incredibly important to intentionally leave some things for you to edit down the line. Because when you approach the editing, it's much easier to have that starting point to get into it. The hardest part of any of this is always the sitting down and focusing part.
Which is why we suggest making it purposeful, making it something fun for you. Because inevitably, your book, your story, if you aim to publish it, it is going to be better if you can edit it. You don't want to end up like me with 5 projects that are just waiting to be edited because I just can't find the motivation to do it, or I have this nice new shiny idea that I would rather work on instead. All of this is part of the process to help you be a better writer, to be happier with your own writing. And it can be difficult when you're looking at it and tearing it apart, but it will be better. So the next time you sit down to write, you can
write selfishly.
If you have a question or comment for our hosts or a topic you'd like us to cover, send us an email at writingroots@aspenhousepublishing.com or find us on Facebook by searching for Aspen House Publishing.